Hi, my name is Yahav, and I was born and raised as an Israeli and as a Zionist. During the past few years, I've gone through a process of questioning the narrative I grew up with regarding this land we live in and the people living on it. This podcast is about voices of the disillusioned. Each episode is a one-on-one heartfelt conversation with an activist who supports the Palestinian struggle, telling the story of the journey that led them to see through what they were taught. Each of these people has their own unique path that I believe anyone can learn from, whether you're a Palestinian or a Jew living here or abroad, or just anyone who feels strongly about this subject. I hope you learn as much as I learn from them about how to build a better future for all people between the river and the sea. Alon Mizrahi, or Eastern Oak, as you call yourself on Twitter, which is literally what Alon Mizrahi means, if you guys wondered, is a working-class intellectual and freedom philosopher. He is also a speechwriter, copywriter, and columnist who writes about becoming disillusioned from Zionism, Capitalism, and Americanism, author of the book Freedom Manifest, and the oldest guest on this podcast to date.
Oh, I'm flattered.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're now officially the elder.
Well, this time comes in life. So I'm here.
Yeah. So we're gonna go back before you became disillusioned from all those things that I mentioned. Tell me about your parents. Let's start from there.
Okay, my parents make a good start. My mother was born in Morocco, and she immigrated, or as Zionists say, made Aliyah in the 50s. She grew up in Haifa, and that's where she met my father, who's from an old Tiberia family. And they married, and they lived in Haifa for a while, in a suburb of Haifa. And they had me and my brothers, and we grew up in a home, I think, very similar to many other working class Mizrachi homes in the Israeli, the outskirts of central Israel. Okay.
Do you want to explain what Mizrachi means to people who don't know?
Mizrachi means Jews who come from countries outside of Europe, mainly. Jews who come from communities in the Arab world, especially. This is the biggest concentration of Mizrachi Jews. And the very name Mizrachi it's really a joke, because Mizrachi means east, and Morocco in Arabic is west.
Yeah. So
this disillusionment comes with the basic terms and the reclaiming of orientation, because the Zionism, especially for Mizrachi Jews, creates a certain disorientation, and it starts with the very name itself. You are called by the opposite of where you come from, which is really fantastic. And usually Jews from Mizrachi origins, from Morocco was the biggest community outside of Europe. Almost 300,000 Jews, a very old community. There were Jews in Morocco for at least 1,500 years. So a very well-established community. I've been to Morocco, and I've seen synagogues 500 years old, beautiful, well kept, and it was really awe-inspiring, because I could feel something I never had in Israel. It felt like home, and Israel kind of feel like, I think for many Jews, and not only Mizrachi Jews, but especially Mizrachi Jews, For them, I don't think Israel really ever became a home. We'll talk about it later, maybe. But the idea of home and belonging and being part of the landscape, feeling naturally where you are, is a very complicated issue for Jews and Zionism and Mizrachi Jews, especially. But going back to my history, like most Mizrachi Jews, my mother was on the, I wouldn't say religious, like not orthodox per se, but on the religious spectrum of ideology or belief. And Jewish tradition, Moroccan Mizrachi Jewish tradition was part of our upbringing and our consciousness. And along with it, almost naturally and seamlessly, the idea that we belong to the Likud party. We're definitely not part of the Israeli left, which is Ashkenazi and snob and secluded. We are definitely not that. We knew that almost instinctively from very early age. So you knew where you were, where you belonged politically, ideologically, culturally. What part of the political theater you're playing, you're supposed to play.
And the people in your neighborhood and your school were also very similar to your family.
Yeah. This was the situation. This was the reality of things. This was everybody. And there were people, I remember someone from from the synagogue we used to go to when I was a child. He had fulfilled some function in the Avodah party.
In the Labor Party.
Labor Party, yeah. And but he did it in a very Yokneam Moroccan way.
What does that mean?
It means we used to come to pray on weekends, and he had this Moroccan accent, and he was one of us. He was a little bit different, but still one of us. And he wasn't. We'll talk about this too later, but what the Israeli left wing means, this Israeli secularism means, is very different. It expresses itself in a very different way, and I think for everyone who grow up in a very well-defined community, who is one of us and who is not, it is very, very instinctive. It's you know it from day two, maybe.
Yeah, I can say the same as someone who grew up in a kibbutz, that it was very Ashkenazi. Same. Like if you weren't part of us, it was very clear. You didn't have to talk about it.
Yeah, and you could tell by the way someone walked, probably, that he didn't belong.
Yeah.
He wasn't part of the kibbutz. And this is the tragedy of closed communities, I think, because it creates this schism in people's brains, this divide of us and them, and this is really a tragedy. And in Israel, everybody, Israel is, I think, one of the most divided countries in the world. Maybe everybody lives in their own part of the land, in their own communities, with walls and fences of every kind. And it is really terrible. It's such a small country with so many different, really, ghettos. We just duplicated the ghetto model into Israel. But I grew up in this like traditional Mizrachi family, working class family, and in Israel, class and ethnic origins and everything is very well. It's a very well-oiled machine. Every part belongs in its rightful place, and I grew up with this consciousness of where I was as a Jew, as an Israeli, and someone who comes from a Moroccan family. So I knew my story, though in my family, and I think in many families similar to mine, we weren't very political. We love to think about, this is the contradiction. We knew we were different. We knew we were not kibbutznikim. We knew we were not Ashkenazi, and we knew we were not secular, and we knew we weren't left wing.
Like you weren't part of the hegemony of Israel.
Yeah, we were terrified by it, and we hated it, this hegemony. But at the same time, on the openly, we had this illusion of we are Israeli. We are just Israeli, and this all talk of origins and Moroccans, especially the Moroccan experience in Israel, is especially painful. It's worthy of a whole different
different podcast.
Yeah, all different podcasts. But I recommend people go and read something about this, because it's really, people were uprooted like overnight. Communities, 500 and 1,000 and 1,500 years old communities, with the cemeteries and synagogues and neighborhoods and relationships and trade and language and geographic orientation and a culture, an ancient culture, well-established, well-rooted culture. They were uprooted overnight by Zionist, vanguard, who was sent there to make a mess of their lives and make them come to Israel to become a cheap labor force for the Ashkenazi. Which this sounds harsh, but this was
it's
the
reality. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it was what it was.
There's also protocols of leaders in the beginning of the state of Israel saying this. It's written down, like saying.
Yeah, it's written.
David Ben Gurion saying that this is why we brought them here. It's not just something that, it's not like a conspiracy that someone brought up.
Yeah, and you could just realize it from looking at the maps of Israel and seeing where the kibbutzim were put on the ground, and near them there's always like a workers' storehouse, which is like where they put mostly the Moroccans.
What they call development towns.
Development towns where they always used to go to work for white Jews outside of their towns, which had nothing to support a life of creativity and culture, and
like there was no chance for self-sufficiency in those places.
No way. And the people from the kibbutzim, they came maybe 20 years. They had come to Israel maybe 20 years before my mother came here,
or at the same time,
or sometimes at the same time. Yeah, but everybody knew, and this is true to this day. The landlords in Israel are white Jews, and the rest of us are tenants.
And you developed like an awareness of this later on in life. But when you were growing up, it was just the reality. This is how things are, and this is how they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know about other societies where political criticism is encouraged. I haven't heard about a society like this, and it certainly wasn't the case about Israel or about Yokneam, where I grew up.
Which is a development town outside of Haifa, right?
Yeah. There were so many conflicts I was blind to and deaf to. In me and in society, I didn't have the vocabulary to think about things critically. So my biggest dream as a teenager was to become a hero Jewish soldier and kill enemies, which means Arabs, and become this figure, this strange and demented model of Zionism, this murderer, which is like everybody aspires to be, quite psychotically.
And so this is what you did.
Yeah, this was my dream, and I thought it was going to be my salvation from the life of boredom in this where I grew up, which really had Very little. It was everything in Israel is relatively new, and nothing was built with like the intention of creating life or cultured life as it's meant to be. It's always this model of bringing more people and building more houses and paving more roads.
And everything is like just enough to
it.
survive, just to like sustain life, but not like actual rich life or something like that.
Yeah. The development towns, just like just like the Mizrachi thing, it means just the opposite. Okay, just mean
because it's not supposed to be developed.
Development. Yeah, nothing develops there. It's going backward, and it still goes backward to this day. Yeah. Every time I go and visit Yokneam, I'm appalled by how backwards it is. And I mean, not the people. I love the people there, but politically and culturally, it's like a time machine, which only goes one way. So I joined the army, like everyone did, and I wanted to be this fighter, warrior nonsense. So I joined this unit that served in the occupied territories, and I had like a prolonged basic training and a little more than that, and then I was sent to Gaza Strip, to Shati refugee camp.
Did you know at the time what this means, refugees in a refugee camp? Like, where are they refugees from? Was this a question in your mind when you got there?
There was no question. Refugees meant a blood libel made against Jews. It was a term Palestinians, Arabs, and anti-Semites conjured in order to hurt Israel and to take something from us. It had nothing to do with reality. So no, I had no idea who those people were. And it stayed that way for many more years after my military service. I knew the people I saw every day were dangerous and dirty and not like me. And they didn't belong. And they were only waiting for a chance to kill us and displace us. Which sounds really horrific when I say it, but this is the mindset. This is the mindset till today, and we see, as we speak, Palestinians are being shot every day, like endlessly. Every day someone dies, or two or three. This happens every day.
Yeah,
and this is the mindset of soldiers who are stationed in these places. This is what they have in mind. When they see a 50 or 60-year-old Palestinian, someone who could be their father or their grandfather, or someone who could be their brother or sister, they only see threat so terrible. It cannot be contained or met in any other way but pointing a gun.
And it can't be human.
Certainly can't.
And so you were performing these arrests. This is mostly what you did in the refugee camp?
Yeah, our time was, divided. Some of it was keeping guard around our camp where we were.
The army base.
Yeah.
Inside of Gaza.
Inside of Gaza.
This is obviously before the siege.
This is,
if anyone's wondering.
Yeah, this is like 92. Okay.
This is just before like the Oslo Accords, and the Palestinian Authority was still not a thing, really.
Yeah,
and definitely not
really. Yeah.
Definitely not Hamas controlling Gaza or the Fatah controlling the West Bank. So it was a different reality.
It's a different reality. It's on a timeline. It's between the end of the first Intifada and the beginning of the bloody conflict that started along with the Oslo Accords. This is just the few years between these two very important periods, and we were there in Gaza. And there was a time, the highlight of my time there there was a time where 400 members of Hamas were deported to Lebanon by then Prime Minister Rabin, and the Israeli left-wing parties went along with it.
Of course.
Yeah, Meretz went along with it, and my unit was assigned the role of arresting, I think, the majority of these 400 people from Gaza.
Like finding them, arresting them,
going
and then
to their homes, finding them, and handing them over to Shabak.
wow. So this was like the assignment for a while.
For I think it was at least 6 weeks of doing this every night from like 8 in the evening till 4 or 5 in the morning. We would roam the streets and alleys of Shati and other places, nearby places in Gaza, and we would knock on doors and we would take people out of their beds and sometimes hand this like warnings or warning letters or announcements, tell this and this, we're looking for them. And of course the Shabak knew they weren't home, but they just want to, disturb the peace and threaten those families and cause them distress.
You were aware of this goal at the time? Like you're supposed to create stress and harass these people?
No, I was in total admiration of the Shabak guys. They looked like gods to me. They had all the power and all the knowledge and all the capabilities I could ever imagine. They knew everything and they knew where everyone were. They could kill people and arrest people and declare anything they wanted. They ruled. Israel rules the occupied territories in ways that people who grew up in Western societies cannot even imagine. You cannot imagine someone in the 20s deciding if 100,000 people will go to work tomorrow, or if they can leave their homes, or if they cross some street, they may be taken off the street and to some facility where their families will never know where they are, from which they'll be released after a few weeks, tortured and broken. This is beyond imagination for people from normal places, and I think this is one of the biggest challenges in explaining the occupation, because people cannot conceive of the everyday reality, the brutality, the inhumanity that the occupation translates into. All the actions and all the institutions, the ridiculous military courts, the torture facilities, the blackmail, the so-called traitors and double agents you have to always recruit, and brother against brother and niece against uncle, and the whole of this Palestinian society is made a total mess of. Fractured and broken and terrified and unable to have normal anything. Because if a brother cannot trust his brother or sister to tell them something, who they met, what they think, what they saw, what they wrote online, what email they sent, what they spoke about this morning, they cannot do that. They risk being arrested and tortured, or maybe having their brother or sister arrested and tortured this day or this night, and having this held against them for 50 years to come, and their children, when they need to have some some operation, some urgent medical care, and they will be forced to face what they supposedly did like 10 years ago. This is
or what their family members supposedly did
20
years
friends
ago.
Or a friend of a friend. The Israeli occupation forces have a grip around Palestinian necks, which it's unbelievable. I think that the Stasi in Eastern Europe had nothing on the Israeli Shabak.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was like a turning point when you were still in the army? Because I know that you say you became disillusioned years later, but there were things that happened that kind of made you think or feel.
Yeah, I think there were some things that saved me from becoming a monster I thought I was going to be happy to become, but I couldn't become because I was emotionally unprepared for this, or
It's the opposite. You need to be emotionally equipped to not be able to be the monster, and emotionally maimed to be the monster that you're supposed to be.
yeah, and I can think of a few things that really saved me. One can never know. You never know how you will behave in the face of atrocity of this magnitude. You don't know. This really forces you to meet like the demons in you, which you never meet in like normal life, if such a thing even exists. But when I was a young boy, like maybe 8, 9, or 10 years old, the first Lebanon war was going on.
This is 1982.
Yeah, it was between 1982 and it didn't. The first part of the war lasted like a few years, and then Israel finally withdrew from Lebanon in 2001. So it was a very long time, but the first 2 or 3 years were very intense, and Israeli soldiers died every day, and we would sit every day and watch the news, which were always preceded by a number of dead soldiers. And this created this grim atmosphere, and everybody thought about it and talked about it. But we would see on television, and I remember this vividly. We would see a Lebanese family or a Palestinian family whose house had been demolished by Israel. And you would usually see a mother or grandmother sitting on a stone somewhere on the ruins of her home, and maybe weeping, and small children around her. And my father would say, what do you think is going to happen with this child? What kind of psychology is he going to develop? Is he not going to hate us for what we did? What did this child do to deserve this? This child didn't do anything to deserve this. And I was an Israeli Jewish child sitting in the comfort of my safe home in Yokneam. But I got it. I understood it. My father's heart was open to the misery of this Palestinian woman and this Palestinian child. And I think this emotion, this empathy, this humanity, it really resonated with me, and it stayed with me. And it's one of the main things that saved me. Because when you're exposed to humanity, to someone who shows mercy and shows grace, who refuses to hate and do something evil is expected to do or expected to feel, I think it changes something in you. It's really one of the most powerful emotions you can experience in life, I think, especially as a child.
But your father, why was his heart with this woman and this child if he knew that they were the enemy and he was educating his children to go and kill this enemy? And he came from Tiberias, which was a city that was wiped out completely of its Palestinian residents.
Yeah.
This cognitive dissonance. How was he holding these two in him?
Well, I think that during that time, I think today it's different. My father changed in certain ways, but in those years, he was. My father grew up really an Arab boy. My father's mother tongue is Arabic. He spoke Arabic. I asked him this like a week ago. And asked him, what language did you speak at home? And he said, my mother would always speak to me in Arabic, and I would answer in Hebrew. And it's so beautiful and so sad at the same time. And my father used to work in construction for many years, and I used to go with him sometimes to to those sites he worked on. He used to install windows and screen doors and stuff. And during those years, the majority of workers were Arab. And they would speak Arab with him, and he would answer. They would call him Ya Ma'allim, which means Mister in Arabic. So my father is really an Arab, a Jewish Arab. This is really what he is. And he used to hear Arab music, and he never forgot his Arabic. So I think when presented with this kind of conflict between my father was born in 1942, and Israel was established in 1948. So this country, this political reality that was forced upon him and made him choose between his identity, his childhood memories, who he was, and his political identification, it was too tough for him. He couldn't handle it, because I think my father is a noble man in this regard. He has a heart, really. So he can't be cruel. And he told me terrible stories about things he saw in wars in 1967, in Lebanon. He told me about the bombardment of Beirut. He couldn't even describe it. He told us you could see 1,000 cannons bombarding parts of Beirut at the same time for hours on end, for days on end. He said it's something you cannot even imagine. This was during the first Lebanon war.
How can someone like this still not only support, the political entity, but specifically the political party that says, this is the right thing, this is what we should be doing, this is okay, we should sustain this?
Well, I think the poison pill is religion.
Oh, you think it's because of religion?
Yeah.
Even though Zionism is very secular in its roots.
Well, it's on the face of it. But the idea of Jewish or a Jewish identity, you cannot disconnect it from the religion. Judaism is first and foremost a religion, before it is, if it is at all, a national identity. And I think it's something very new, very artificially made up, the idea of Jews as a national identity.
That's what Zionism is, and it's new, relatively new.
Yeah, it is new, and it feels engineered. It doesn't feel authentic, right? It doesn't catch, really.
So you're saying that his connection to Judaism was what kept him, and the connection that the country, the government made between Judaism and Zionism made him have to cling on to Zionism because his Judaism was very important to him.
Yes. And I think that the demagogues, Israeli demagogues, know exactly how to play on people's, emotions and tender places. So if you're sensitive to a particular, strand of
identity.
Yeah, this is what they will address, and for many Jews, and I think for many Mizrachi Jews, this is a very tender place. The idea that we want to belong to this group of people who believe in this ethos. But it used to be a lot, I think, softer before Israel. Israel took this emotion, this feeling, which is problematic in itself, but it doesn't have to be this brutal. And in Israel, it became very, very brutal. It became a weapon, really. It was weaponized. Okay, this identity, which can be something very uplifting. It can be something that translates into a universal love for people, really.
It should be.
Yeah,
so it should be.
Everything should. If it's not universal, if it doesn't love people, then fuck it. Then it's garbage.
You mean any ideology?
Any ideology. If it's not about love for people, then what the fuck is it about? The main thing about any ideology, about any idea, is how it treats and how it thinks about people who do not belong to this set of people, to this group. And if you have the noblest idea, if you're a Christian and you have the noblest ideas of, I don't know, redemption, of people being saved and all this, but you think people who do not believe like you are the devil, then I think you're an idiot. And it's the same thing if you're a Muslim or a Buddhist. I don't care. It's the same thing. If you have a belief system that doesn't lead you to just love people as they are, then you are, I think, in trouble. And I think you are deeply misguided.
I want to go back to Gaza, and I want you to tell me a little bit about an encounter you had there.
I had this really dream moment during my time in Gaza, which some things happen as part of the stream of reality which are so bizarre and out of place. It has the quality of a dream or a vision. This is what happened to me in Gaza one time. So as part of this mission of arresting people and harassing people, we went to this house, which was a nice looking house in Gaza. The floor outside it looked clean. It was like white marble floor outside, and it was clean. It looked like it was just cleaned, wiped by someone. And we knocked on the door. It wasn't very violent. It's really strange. Sometimes the most violent experiences have very peaceful moments in them. So we knocked on the door and we waited. We were a group of 5 or 6 soldiers. I was standing behind my officer and I was waiting along with everybody. And then someone came to the door and opened the door. And it was my sister. I looked in amazement and wonder. For a fraction of, I don't know, for a short time, I didn't understand what was going on, because it was definitely my sister for a minute. It was not my sister, of course. It was a Palestinian young woman, about 18 or 19, just maybe a bit older than that, maybe 20 or 21. And she was the spitting image of my sister. The same skin color, the same height, the same eyebrows, the same hair, the same eyes, the same walk, the same everything. It was like my sister, identical twin, totally. It was so real. I was taken by surprise. It was really metaphysical.
What was going through your mind when you saw your sister's identical twin?
I was astonished, really. I cannot explain how. It's like, just imagine, anyone who hears this, going to a foreign country and knocking on a door and seeing someone who looks the same. It's your brother or sister, exactly the same, except it's not them. It's someone else. And you're there on a mission to do something bad to those people. This is the moment I had. It's a moment of revelation, really. And because I think the main part of Zionist education is the dehumanization of Palestinians. This is really what Zionism is. Zionism is believing that non-Jews who live in the land of Israel or Palestine, whatever you call it, they are not people and they are not human, and therefore you can do whatever you want to them.
Even if they look exactly like your sister.
Well, this moment made me question in a very gentle and naive way what I was doing there. If someone could look so much like my sister and behave and talk like my sister, how is she my staunch enemy someone I have to humiliate and contain and maybe kill if I have to. And we see this every day. We saw Shirin Abu Akleh like a few months ago being shot, and nurses, and they shoot everybody. They shoot everybody, even if they look exactly like a sibling. They would shoot them without questions. This moment with its dream quality really, I think, remained like a very big question mark in me for many years to come.
And you still kept being Zionist at the same time.
Yeah, this is... Listen, Zionism is like a cult. And living in a cult is not easy. Especially if it's not like a 1,000 people in a farm somewhere. It's a country. It's everybody you know. It's everything you hear and see, and every television show you ever saw, and every news you ever heard, serve this perspective.
Especially if your English isn't that good, then it's even more of a bubble. All the content in Hebrew serves this.
And I don't think anybody in Israel consumes a political opinion in language other than Hebrew, except maybe in very Zionist English, of which there's an abundance of.
So while you were still in the same political agenda, you were remembering this, and you didn't really have an answer. It was still a question.
I think for as long as I was willing to delay, like really facing these two opposites, Zionism and humanism, and I was willing to imagine they could, coexist. People can believe in very odd things until they decide they have to have clarity, to understand what's really going on. Not what I think, what I want to believe, what really goes on, what's going on.
In the actual reality.
Yeah, in the actual reality, not in my mind, not in my wishes, but what's happening. And especially I think American Jews are enamored with this kind of talk. What Zionism is. What is Zionism? Am I a Zionist? Is it okay to be a Zionist? Should we ostracize people who are Zionists? Should we? How should we handle? What do we do with the family member who is a part-time Zionist? And all this romantic bullshit, talking about Zionism as an idea, as a concept, which is not. Zionism is a practice. It's not an ideology. It's not a concept. It's nothing like this. It's a practice. Zionism is what Zionism does. What Zionists do. This is Zionism. What Zionism does is grab land and throw people out and take over stuff and expand and continue creating this demagoguery of we are so moral and we are a democracy, all the while murdering people, taking over their land and their property and shooting them and sending attack dogs at them and taking everything they have. This is what Zionism does. And this strange and idiotic notion that you can talk about Zionism as a concept. We need to end this. The time for this conversation is over. It's over for a long, long time. It is over. We should look at what Zionism, which is Israel, what is Israel doing? What is Israel doing at every moment, at every part of its, domain? What is Israel doing? This is what we should be looking at, and move away from this artificial naivete. It's manufactured naivete. It's not genuine, because people know what's going on. It's not a mystery. It's not happening on a different planet. You just open a website, a half decent website, and you'll see.
I think what's really sad is that the Israeli media really keeps people blind. If you're an 18-year-old Israeli and you just consume Israeli media, it's actually possible that you're not aware of the amount of Palestinian civilians who die every single day. I mean, it's something, most of them don't even reach the Israeli media, so you don't even know that they're being killed.
It's not possible, it is definite. You don't know about this, and if you know about this, it is framed in a way that
they deserve
guarantees your identifying completely with the Zionist side. And the so-called Israeli media, it's an arm, it's a propaganda arm of Zionism. There's
of
no
the army.
Of the army, yeah, the army and the state and the ministries and the universities and I don't know, high-tech companies. It's all the same thing. It's all one thing, really. In a place so devoted to a political vision of this insanity, everybody is on board. They know exactly what they should say about anything instinctively in a minute, in a second. Israelis are kept in a closed jar, really. They have no idea. I think Jews have never been dumber than during Zionism. Zionism really is the moral and intellectual and emotional death of Jews. In this way, I think it's worse than the Holocaust. Because survivors of the Holocaust can still maintain their humanity. They can create something new, a world full of meaning, like some directors did, some playwrights, some
authors.
Yeah, they created something. It doesn't condone, it doesn't turn the Holocaust into something positive. But they were able to take it and process it in a way that would become beneficial to other human beings. Whereas I think Zionism it bottles up people so completely that I think we are totally unable to think in humane terms anymore. We cannot think in any way different there than superiority and power and control and have to make ourselves look good.
So when did you become aware of all this? Because it sounds like for the first half of your life or more even, you didn't think like this. If you would go to Alon 20 years younger and you would talk like this, what would he say? What would he think about this person speaking this way?
He would probably call me a Jew-hating Jew.
A self-hating Jew?
Yeah.
And what happened that made you shift?
You know, I talked about this incident with my father and his approach in general. That was one thing that I think saved me. And the other thing that saved me was literature. I was a very keen reader as a child, and I read incessantly. I read anything I could lay my hands on, encyclopedias and novels and poetry and anything. I would go to a library and take a few books. I was allowed to take like 2 or 3 books every time. And I would sit outside and read them and go back in and change them and take other books. Yeah, I used to read all the time. I would wake up on a Saturday morning, like 6 or 7 a.m. and grab the encyclopedia and read it for hours on end.
Wow.
And then I went and had a degree in English language and literature in Haifa University. And then it like expanded my horizons and my vocabulary. And I started to realize like the dreams I had as a child about something much greater than this, I don't want to say pathetic existence, but very small, very limiting existence. Very narrow-mindedness, like this smallness. We are not meant to be this small. We are huge. And then after I finished, I graduated from Haifa University and I started working, translating and writing marketing and technical stuff for high-tech companies. And my life took this direction, and like a few years later, later my younger brother Gideon died in a motorcycle accident, and he was the closest person to me ever. Like someone I loved so much. He was like part of me. He was really my emotional and philosophical twin. We were, I don't want to say the same, but very, very close to being the same in so many ways. And our family story contributed to this closeness, to this intimacy. And it was such a beautiful and talented and loving and gracious human being. I loved him so dearly. And when he died on a Saturday morning, and I had the phone call from his wife telling me about that tragedy that just happened, I remember myself going down the stairs. I shared the flat with a friend on Ben Yehuda Street. And I remember going down the stairs, waiting for a friend to take me home to start all the preparations for the funeral and the Shiva and all this. And I remember going down the stairs and thinking, that's it. My life is going to change now. And I have to find truth or I'm going to die. I just remember those thoughts clearly.
Why do you have to find truth? Why is truth the answer to this emptiness?
I don't know exactly why. It's something you can only gather like in retrospect or believe you understand. But there are some things we may never really know. But I think when everything around you, when your whole world crumbles, when everything falls apart, I think the truth is the one thing that can save you. Because it gives you some firmness, something to stand on, something you know for sure. And you can only know for sure things you know to be true. Everything else is just unsteady. It's shaking. You cannot, rest on it. You cannot stand on it. You'll fall down. And when you feel like your whole life, falls around you like a house of cards.
How old were you then?
I was 36. Gideon was 33. And then I started my journey, which goes on till today, like almost 14 years later. I had this like renewed devotion because I was always like this in a way, but I kind of forgot about it. But this tragedy with my brother like made it very, very clear to me. This is what I have to do in order to survive and be who I want to be and fulfill my potential. And I started this journey of finding truth. I realized I had to forget so much stuff that I took for granted. So many pieces of reality which were only my imagination and not really reality. So my identity and what it means to be Israeli and what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be a Zionist, what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a Westerner, so-called. And so many things that I don't know, I thought they were like natural and spontaneous, but nothing political ever is.
So you started taking these things apart and realizing that a lot of them actually are constructs.
All of them, really. I think that this is where I am now in my journey. I don't know where I'm going to be in like 5 or 10 years from now, but I think it's a very well-based place. Understanding that everything you know in this life, anything you know, anything you imagine and feel is part of an organized, engineered to an extent, political creation. Every idea you have in your head, I mean, you and everyone who listens, okay, and me too. If you identify as an American, if you think what America means is this and this and that, or the UK or Germany or history, I mean, every week we hear about a new discovery that changes everything you knew about prehistory, about the Neanderthals. Every week it changes. So how we see the world, like divided into countries. The world isn't really divided into countries. It's just an imagination. There is no barrier between countries, really, between people. It's just a construct. It's a thing of the imagination and religions and gender roles and many things that go along with it, and how we see history, like in the Judeo-Christian world, and maybe to some extent in the Muslim world as well. We have this, like we put like a point in history. We select a point in history, 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 years ago, and say this is where things that matter started.
This is where time began.
This is what time important for us began. But this is so I don't know. This is so arbitrary. Yeah. Well, why do you choose this point? I mean, humans just like you and me roamed this planet for thousands and thousands of years before all this, and they were free. They didn't have this. They didn't have to think in these terms. This very limited and stifled and bottled up idea that we have about life and about everything. And so we are imprisoned in this jail made of very stupid ideas, very shallow. It's become like a mission for me in life to become freer and freer and to help other people think more freely.
Tell me about the moment that all of this house of cards that you call it kind of fell apart. Was it led with pain or fear or maybe celebration? Like, I'm finally released of all these misconceptions. Like, what were the feelings?
I think it was all of this and more. And we have the ability to feel many things at the same time. When you know you're having a journey and your burden is becoming lighter all the time, this is something that can make you optimistic.
You felt like you were leaving more and more weight behind as you went along?
Yeah, so much weight, so much unnecessary weight. Yeah. And being free is traveling light, politically, ideologically, because you don't need much. You don't need much. You only need to be respectful of people and open-hearted and open-minded, and that's it. That's it. You have my passport.
So this is instead of your Israeli passport. You would trade it for that passport.
Yeah, we don't need passports. Passports imprison us.
This process was simultaneous with your loss of your brother. So I'm assuming that there was a lot of pain and also a lot of celebration at once.
Yeah, there was when something very big and mighty happens in your life, a tremendous amount of energy is released in you. And if you don't do something with it, it can be very dangerous and destructive and maybe deadly. Pain and sorrow is not depression. It's not being static. It is so much energy. You can do so much with it. And for me, it was the only way I could do something meaningful and positive with this almost unbearable pain I had in me, and I still have.
And did you have regrets at that time? Where you were shedding things, and did you remember that time when you met, quote unquote, your sister in Gaza, or you were harassing people in the middle of the night with guns?
I wouldn't say regret, because I don't believe regret is pointless. It's narcissistic to an extent, because it's self-pity. It was like reliving an old trauma, really, because when I was willing to admit that I was in Gaza for no good reason and serving no good purpose in being part of something, an evil machine, and remembering like episodes from my time in Gaza, like this one was a like soft and positive one, but there were other ones which were painful and involved humiliating other people and threatening other people and causing so much fear to my fellow human beings, my brothers and sisters from Gaza. So when I was emotionally prepared to process what really happened, what I was really part of, this came with a lot of pain. I remember for a few weeks, I think it was in 2016 maybe, this is where it really hit me. When Breaking the Silence had this big campaign and people started talking about their experiences, and was like a big shift for me. It was like a symbolic point in time when I was like, changing allegiance. I was no more an Israeli patriot, and now I'm freer to be me and express me. And I wrote about a few episodes that happened to me. Listen, one time I almost shot an 8 or 9-year-old kid who held a stone like above my head in the Jeep I was in. And I was close to killing this boy. Maybe a second or two. And the Jeep drove away. The driver pulled away. And I didn't have to decide if I'm going to do this. But I wasn't far from doing this. And there were other incidents, terrible incidents. I was only 19. What was I doing there? How could anyone send me there and pretend they care for me? We are one. We are a democracy. We do good. What is this? They're sending me to shoot someone who could be my brother, someone 10 years younger than me. And many times I've thought about this. What would happen if I had pulled the trigger and shot this kid? What would have become of me for the rest of my life? It was feeling all this pain was part of the process of healing, really.
Was this also paired with seeing the hypocrisy of Zionism claiming that it's for all Jews and knowing what Zionism has done to Mizrachi Jews, to Moroccan Jews? A lot of times, like Ashkenazim will be talking about the Nakba and the Palestinians, and the Mizrachim will say, but like, why are you shifting the conversation to them as the ultimate victims? We were also very, very discriminated against and used.
Yeah.
So how did those two things go together in your existence?
One of the first changes, because I think that the mind, the psyche is a very smart thing. So it will bring forth something that you can handle. Okay, the something which is possible for you to handle at a certain point of time. So the first thing that I realized was not as I used to think about it, was my being Mizrachi and not an Israeli. And I was starting to admit that I was feeling, and all my life I had felt, not Israeli. And I started remembering being rejected, being left out of so many places and of so many conversations because of how I look and who I am and where my parents come from. And I was willing to admit it, that I was different. When I was willing to admit that I was different, the idea of one Israeli identity is false, immediately I started thinking, if I feel like this, Well, how does a Palestinian feel?
Mm.
If I feel left out, if I feel humiliated because I'm not allowed into a club, this happened to me a million times, and to every Mizrachi man. There are so many places you are not allowed to approach. If this causes so much humiliation, and the memory of, my mother used to tell us how her mother, my grandmother, was almost pushed down the stairs when she was pregnant because she came to look for a job, and she didn't have this red like identification card, something you have the workers union in Israel at the time. And she was almost pushed down the stairs, and she was pregnant. There's this insult. Yes, people don't forget humiliation ever. Humiliation is something that is so hard to process, so hard. And when this happens to someone, to a person, to a community, this is a way to make conflicts eternal. This is how Israel guarantees on purpose that this conflict will not be resolved. Israel makes sure it humiliates every Palestinian child and baby and anyone. This is how we make sure this conflict will never end. This is how we do it. So people don't forget humiliation, and acknowledging my strangeness, my being different, the humiliation I felt growing up and becoming who I was, it really opened me up to understanding and seeing the Palestinian side of things. And I think the main point here is legitimacy. If more parts of me are legitimate, then more parts of more people are legitimate to me.
Then more people are legitimate to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the part that is Mizrachi, the part that is Arab, actually, is more legitimate, and therefore the Palestinians are also more legitimate.
And at that point, that started for the first time in my life. I read thousands of books as a young man. I never read one book or one chapter about Palestinians, ever. So at this point, for the first time in my life, and I was almost 40, and I was a very well-educated man, very well-read. I never wanted to come across anything remotely Palestinian, anything that remotely presents Palestinians as human.
Even Edward Said, which they taught me in college and didn't tell me he's Palestinian. So maybe you learned it as well without knowing.
And I think this is this is for me the key, because this whole Zionist scheme is built on the ability to instill this sense of dehumanization. And if you manage to show Arabs as human beings, as people who have families and emotions and relationships, just normal stuff, this wall comes apart. You can only maintain something like Zionism if you constantly portray the other people on the other side of the wall as monsters.
And also the Arab within us as monsters.
Sure, yeah. The Arab in me, which is like the local, the regional representation of brown. This is what it means, okay? This is the non-white inferior being that is, in this place is called Arab. In other places it's called African or black or Latino, or anywhere has its own definition of less than white.
Wow, this is a lot to unpack at age 40.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I'm adventurous.
There are many Mizrachi activists in Israel who are very Zionist. And you wrote about this in your blog. And I really loved this piece that you wrote, because you basically took yourself as like a prototype, and a Mizrachi activist called Avishai Ben Chaim, who's very known for his activism, as a prototype of the Zionist Mizrachi activist, as opposed to you, the anti-Zionist Mizrachi existence. and you were like analyzing the differences between them.
Comparing and contrasting.
Yeah. So what led you to do this and compare yourself to another human to try to make a point?
Yeah, because there's this narrative in Israeli politics and Israel political thought that Mizrachim, just like I thought when I was, in my teens, that if you're a Mizrahi, you have to be Likud.
And you have to be a patriot.
You have to be a patriot, and you have to hate Arabs, and you have to hate Ashkenazi left-wingers. And these are the bounds of your political being. And Avishai Ben Chaim is doing it again now, like the past 5 or 6 years or something like that, is like he's
like reinforcing these messages, basically.
Yeah, and he always talks about how Mizrachim are disenfranchised and being left out, and how Ashkenazim from the bourgeois in central Israel are taking everything for themselves and leaving nothing for others, and they hate Mizrachim,
which is also true.
Them.
This is all true.
It is true. But what Avishai Ben Chaim does is he reaffirms Zionism. He reaffirms the Zionist superstructure by pretending to be critical of some players in it. And if you're not really radical, if you don't show the whole picture, not just part of it, because it doesn't offer any solution. There's no catharsis in his philosophy. Okay, in his view, Mizrachim are doomed to always whine, and this is the Ashkenazi stereotype of Mizrachim. They whine, okay? Always whine and say, "Oh, we don't have this. Took this from us, and we are so left behind. It's not right what you're doing," and he offers no solution. And he always stresses his being a Zionist, a big Zionist, and he loves Zionism. So this like false conflict that he represents really only perpetuates the Zionist mechanism,
which
machine.
Is what made all that towards Mizrachim in the first place, which is what made it possible to disenfranchise and to discriminate and to abuse.
When you create this like safety valve for relieving some kind of anger, but without any concrete, political action or political or a different political vision of, and I know exactly why he does this, because if he talks about justice in concrete terms, and
then he can't ignore the Palestinians.
You can't ignore the Palestinians. You have to always keep in this like symbolic, amorphous cloud of complaints without action, without change, without real change. And both Ashkenazim and Mizrachim are in love with him because he reaffirms all the bullshit they believe in.
But he doesn't change anything.
No, the Ashkenazim say, "Oh, look at those Mizrachim. They keep whining about stuff. They don't say, they are not grateful for everything we've done for them."
Or to them.
They're ungrateful, yeah. We brought them into light from darkness. How can they not love us? How they cannot appreciate us? So, and Mizrachim say, you Ashkenazim, you stole stuff from us, yada, yada, yada. And okay, what now? This is exactly all political conversations in Zionism are fucking the same. Pardon my French. Like, this is the Zionist left wing. Exactly. This is how they talk about the occupation. Okay? They say, it is very bad. We killed all those children. And the next day they say, it's so terrible. We destroyed that village. And the next day they say, this community of shepherds, it is so unbearable what was done to them. Oh, and they have no memory. And they have no conclusions. It never comes to anything. Okay, what's the bottom line? What are you gonna do? Are you gonna ever do something? Are you ever gonna take action? And the answer is no. No one is ever going to take action. Everybody is hypnotized. Zionism has
Hypnosis.
it deprived us of our ability to think and act and move in this world. This is really amazing. This success. I think this will be the destruction of Zionism ultimately. It will be too successful. Its own success is going to be...
It's going to kill itself eventually.
Yeah.
Is this why you went to this past Nakba Memorial Day? You decided to go and kind of like investigate with the social television organization and create this like piece online about the Nakba in Lod.
Yeah, and it was so therapeutic and so beautiful. I came to realize that the only way I can regain some of the human decency Zionism has taken from me and from my family and my people, my generation, whatever you want to call it, is go and listen to Palestinians themselves. Not the organizations who claim to represent them and are always only white Jews using American white Jewish money to talk American white Jewish language. Just let them speak, give them the space to, and they spoke beautifully, they spoke poetically, they spoke with so much humanity and compassion and wisdom about the experiences of their families during the Nakba and the terrible tragedies that happen in Lod, which would sound exactly the same like Jewish towns in Eastern Europe during the Nazi occupation. It sounds exactly the same. They were even some of the compounds the men were kept in were called concentration camps.
Or ghettos. As well. Yeah.
Yeah. And massacres and just unimaginable atrocities. And they were able to talk about it with so much maturity and clarity of vision. It was wonderful. And I heartily recommend it for everybody. Go and listen to Palestinians talk about their experiences and their histories and their families. Go and listen for yourselves. Don't let anyone mediate this history for you.
Yeah, and there are a lot of books written about it and a lot of material.
Books and interviews. Like it's not there. Yeah, go online. You'll find a lot to watch and learn. Yeah.
So tell me what you aspire for this place and why people would ask, like, why are you still here? If you can't stand all the Zionism and, everything that's going on, the automatic question is, so why are you here?
I'm here for very prosaic reasons. Because I have a daughter here. She is 3 years old and she's the apple of my eye, the most beautiful and wonderful thing that exists. And I don't plan on staying here for the rest of my life.
So you do aspire to leave somewhere?
Yeah. This place is like a really bad trip. It is so artificial and so manufactured. It doesn't.
So tell me how this all led to your to the book that you wrote, the Freedom Manifest.
I was intrigued by freedom all my life. This sounds like it conflicts with everything I said until now, but it doesn't really. Because freedom is not like a detached idea in philosophy. Freedom is always contrasted with actual realities. And when I started to understand that my quest, my desire to be free, was beginning to be more disciplined, and I understood there are chapters to freedom. There are different aspects and parts of freedom that I could describe and explain the processes I went through and how one can look at reality and what it means to be free, not in philosophical terms, but how the environment around you prevents your freedom, okay? How does it work? Because this is the only thing that really concerns me.
So only understanding how your environment, like in a political way, prevents your freedom can make you free no matter what your environment is, no matter what your physical conditions are, which is very ironic, but I like that idea.
Yeah, you're only free if you are truly yourself. But in order for you to be truly yourself, you need to free yourself from all these layers of all these artificial emotions and opinions, which are nonsense, they don't make any sense. Identifying with a certain flag and a certain people and a certain place and a certain time, these are only circumstances. You cannot make anything, a principle out of it. This is really bizarre. And people still do it. This World Cup, this football World Cup, this is so amazing.
We could rant about that for an hour separately.
Yeah, but I just want to say something about it because, and this happens like the hegemonies of our time, like the big institutions, the big financial monsters of our time, and the big national institutions. They manage to control opinion and control media through the part of society which is supposed to be critical and supposed to show something different. And everyone around me who are supposedly sophisticated and aware and woke, they were watching this World Cup because in a way which is like presumably ironic, but not really. They were excited, but they were aware of their supposed this convoluted idea of a misunderstanding of you need to understand things differently and show a different vision of and instead they were like watching this all the time, and this really amazes me. And what is this really World Cup? What is some people who were born in a certain country at a certain time, they represent 20 people represent a country, and everyone whose forefathers were born in this country need to identify. And this country was like arbitrarily drawn on a stupid piece of paper, which has no fucking meaning at all.
I remember
and this obliges you to be emotionally involved in a game.
Yeah, and everybody here were like waving the Moroccan flag, Jews and Palestinians alike, but they were like fighting over like who owns the Moroccans, right? The Moroccan Jews were like, no, but we're Moroccans, so we should be proud of this achievement. And the Palestinians were like, no, but the Moroccan team is Arab and they support Palestinians and they wave the Palestinian flag in their victory picture. So everybody was like, no, Morocco is ours. No, it's ours. And it's like, what?
Yeah,
everything is symbolic.
Yeah, when people are obsessed and filled with symbols, a tyranny celebrates. This is everything that the tyranny desires. People are endlessly occupied by symbols. What this symbols this and this symbols that. When the only thing that matters is what's really happening.
What's happening on the ground, which is during the World Cup, so many Palestinians were being shot. So like this piece of cloth was being flown by,
and the Qataris bought this enterprise for billions of dollars of petrodollars and blood money and slavery and
it's just like you were saying, like what Zionism is, what Zionism does, and at the same time, like the World Cup is symbolizing one thing, but simultaneously it's the same powers at be that are killing people, innocent people on the street every single day that can't watch the World Cup because they're dead. It's so ironic.
And one step further, it's the same powers that shoot the Palestinians and hold the World Cup. It's the exact
at the end of the
powers.
day. Yeah. Or buy weapons from each other.
Yeah, they need to do this in order to have that. They do. It's the same, and this is what This is what I meant before when I said nothing in reality is spontaneous and just happens and natural. It is not natural. It is fabricated.
Yeah.
Our reality it's designed in a certain way for us to think certain things and feel certain emotions. And that's it. You're looking, we are constantly looking at the stage without realizing it's a stage.
Yeah.
We don't look left or right or up and down and see it as a puppeteer.
Because we're busy looking at the gladiators, the soccer players on the grass.
Yeah, we are indoctrinated. We are domesticated to be this way. My journey to freedom. I always feel every day. I feel like I'm bigger. Like I am more things. I can be more things. I can be. When I studied English literature and I read Walt Whitman and Emerson, and Walt Whitman has this poem which is. This should be like the anthem of the entire planet. It's called Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. And in this poem, it like the speaker talks to people who will pass by a certain point where he's looking like 100 years hence or 200 years hence. And he creates this unity of time and space. I mean, when you realize that the fact that you live like at this particular point in time, it's only chance. It's arbitrary, and I mean, it would be the same you 100,000 years ago, and we even existed in particles of matter 1,000,000 years ago, or 200,000 years ago, right? Some because we existed in our forefathers' bodies, right? So there's so much time and so many experiences and capabilities and perspective and a vastness of
the human experience.
Yeah, so much of it is available to us, but we are focused on such a narrow field of view. Such a narrow, small, tiny, just Netflix and some Facebook posts and Twitter tweets, and that's it. And I think people have to rebel against this. People should not accept this. This is not life. This is a very narrow and lame version of life. This is not life. We have to aspire for more.
Do you have a more optimistic way to finish?
I think that at this moment in time, like this cultural moment in time, when we have this apprehension of machines and robots like taking over and making us really irrelevant, and corporations and governments working in tandem to be even more powerful, I think we should remember that life can be planned only to an extent. Humanity is available at every minute, at every turn. We can always choose, and people like us will always be able to choose differently, to choose humanity over political fiction.
I hope we all choose humanity whenever we can.
Yeah.
Which is always.
Always.
So thank you so much, Alon, for coming on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And I'm definitely looking forward to the book that you're writing these days that's going to be published in English. So I will definitely update all my followers when it comes out.
Thank you.
And I hope it really makes headlines all over the world and your words reach everyone.
Amen, sister.
Thank you.